The subway encounter, New York, winter 1972. 5 bully gang members believed they had complete control over a New York City subway car. Then they chose the wrong person. 30 seconds later, the laughter had vanished. A minute later, nobody wanted to fight. And when the lights flickered back on, Bruce Lee had the leader completely defeated, without even looking angry. But the most surprising part wasn't the fight. It was what he said afterward, because those words did more damage than any blow. New York, winter of 1972. The rain had been falling for hours, and the city seemed quieter than usual. At this hour, the subway was occupied by workers heading home, people unable to sleep, and travelers who simply had no other choice. Among them rode Bruce Lee, sitting quietly near the back of the car. He didn't draw anyone's attention. He wore simple clothes, maintained a peaceful expression, and observed the world with an uncommon calm. At first glance, he seemed like just another person heading home after a long day. No one imagined that in a matter of minutes, he would be the only one willing to stand up to 5 men who had successfully intimidated an entire subway car. The watchful eye, although he appeared distracted, Bruce Lee observed everything happening around him. He used the reflection in the windows to discreetly monitor the car without drawing attention. It was a habit developed over time, noticing details without becoming a part of them. No one seemed to notice his presence, and that suited him perfectly. The train advanced through several stations in silence. A few passengers got off, but almost no one boarded. The night continued to slowly empty the cars as Manhattan disappeared above their heads. At one of the next stops, an elderly man boarded the train, leaning on a cane. It was clear he could not see. He walked calmly down the aisle until he found an empty seat and settled in without asking anyone for help. The other passengers barely glanced at him before returning to their own thoughts. On the lapel of his jacket, he wore a small military pin. There was something in his posture that revealed years of discipline and hardships overcome. He sat motionless with both hands resting on his cane, accustomed to facing the world without expecting too much from those around him. From the back of the car, Bruce Lee continued to observe him, not out of pity, but because he had learned to recognize vulnerable people long before trouble found them. The intrusion one more station passed. Then the doors opened again. 5 men entered the car, making far more noise than necessary. Their voices immediately shattered the peace that had reigned throughout the journey. They moved with the confidence of those accustomed to intimidating others and occupying any space as if it belonged to them. Conversations died. Some gazes dropped to the floor. Others turned toward the windows. No one said a word. Bruce Lee watched the reflection of the newcomers in the glass and knew instantly that this night was far from over. The 5 men occupied the center of the car as if they owned it. They spoke loudly, laughed among themselves, and enjoyed the discomfort they were causing. The few remaining passengers did what most people did in those situations: looked away and hoped it would all end soon. It didn't take long for them to find a target. One of the gang members pointed at the blind veteran. The mocking began immediately. First came comments and laughter, then imitations of his walk and the sound of his cane tapping the floor. The group amused themselves while the rest of the car remained silent. The veteran did not respond. He remained seated, motionless, gripping his cane with both hands. He couldn't see what was happening, but he knew perfectly well that these men's attention was locked onto him. And he also knew no one intended to intervene. From the back of the car, one of the gang members noticed Bruce Lee for the first time, who was still sitting in silence. "What are you looking at, Chinatown?" He received no answer. Bruce Lee didn't even look up. His expression did not change. That indifference seemed to annoy the bully more than any insult. The gang member let out a laugh and walked back to the others. Then, the leader of the group decided to end the game. He approached the veteran, looked at the cane resting between his legs, and without warning, kicked it hard. The cane went sliding across the car, clattering against a metal wall. The sound echoed through the train. The old man fell forward and began groping on the floor to find it. No one moved. Not the businessman, not the nurse, not the transit officer. The stand it was then that something completely unexpected happened. In the back of the car, Bruce Lee stood up. He didn't raise his voice, he made no threatening gestures, he simply stood. Yet, that single movement completely shifted the atmosphere of the room. Conversations died, laughter vanished, and even the gang members turned their gaze toward him. Until that moment, he had been invisible. Now, he was the only thing anyone could see. Bruce Lee stood before them showing neither fear nor anger. His posture was calm, almost too calm for the situation. While the other passengers watched nervously, he seemed completely focused, as if he were seeing something no one else could. It took the gang members only a few seconds to react. Then came the laughter. Look at this. The leader didn't take his eyes off Bruce Lee. He looked him up and down and smirked. You want to be a hero tonight, Chinatown? His friends celebrated the remark with loud laughter. To them, this wasn't a confrontation. It was entertainment. 5 men against 1 in a closed subway car, far from any help. But Bruce Lee did not respond to the taunts. The laughter grew louder. The leader tilted his head. Or what? Next came the insults, comments directed at his heritage, his appearance, and anything they thought could make him react. They were looking to provoke an emotional response. They needed to see it. But they got nothing. Bruce Lee remained motionless. Not a single extra word, no gestures, no change in expression. The train continued hurtling through the tunnel. 3 of the gang members were already moving. Without saying it aloud, they began to surround Bruce Lee, cutting off any possible exit. It was obvious this was not new to them. Bruce Lee saw them positioning themselves, yet he did not move. You've already shown your strength, he finally said. You've already chosen someone who cannot defend themselves. What else do you need to prove? For the first time, the leader's smirk vanished. His entire focus was now locked onto Bruce Lee. I need you to sit back down. Silence gripped the car once more. No one breathed normally. No one looked away. Then, the largest man in the group stepped up from behind Bruce Lee and shoved him violently against one of the train's steel poles. The impact rattled the entire car, and for a fraction of a second, everyone thought it was over. Bruce Lee absorbed the shove, regained his balance, and stepped right back in front of them. There was no anger, no impulsive reaction. He simply returned to his position as if the blow had changed nothing. For the first time, something seemed to make the gang members uneasy. The heaviest bully tried to grab him by the jacket to assert his physical dominance, but Bruce Lee brushed his hand away with a brief, precise movement. It wasn't a struggle. It didn't even look like an effort. An instant later, the bully's arm was back at his side, and he looked confused, not quite understanding what had just happened. The atmosphere inside the car began to shift. Until now, it had felt like a familiar scenario. 5 men intimidating someone they deemed weaker. But now, a different feeling emerged, a silent doubt beginning to spread among them. The leader sensed it. He stared at Bruce Lee for several seconds, studying him more closely than before. He no longer saw just an ordinary passenger. There was something about that tranquility that did not fit the situation. Then Bruce Lee spoke. All 5 of you. Leave now. You can still leave. No one answered immediately. Even the passengers seemed to hold their breath. The leader held his gaze for a few seconds more. Then, without warning, he lunged forward and grabbed Bruce Lee by the collar of his jacket with all his strength. It was his way of ending all talk, a signal to the others, a declaration that the wordplay was over. It was the first real mistake he made that night. 30 seconds of darkness. Bruce Lee did not step back, nor did he try to pull away. Instead, he pivoted his body slightly inward, absorbed the tension of the grip, and used it to lock the leader exactly where he needed him. It was a movement so subtle that no passenger could accurately describe it afterward. They only saw that, suddenly, the leader no longer controlled his own feet. An instant later, he was pinned against the seats, his arm extended in a direction his body had not chosen. The entire car held its breath. Then the other 4 rushed in. The narrow subway aisle became a trap with no room for error. But Bruce Lee seemed to understand this better than anyone. He moved with composure, using every inch of the car to his advantage and keeping himself constantly between the attackers and the blind veteran. Blows began coming from different directions. One tried to grab him from behind, another tried to tackle him with his weight, but none of them could maintain control for more than a second. Bruce Lee avoided getting trapped, constantly shifting positions and forcing his opponents to get in each other's way. From the floor, the veteran listened to everything in silence. He couldn't see what was happening, but he could feel that something had shifted. The men who had entered full of confidence were no longer moving the same way. There was tension in their steps, hesitation in their movements. For the first time, they were reacting instead of attacking. One of the gang members managed to land a solid blow to Bruce Lee's ribs. The impact was real. It forced him back, causing him to lean against one of the seats for a split second. The passengers gasped. This was what they had been waiting to see, a sign of weakness. Bruce Lee remained still for a second, caught his breath, and stood back up. Without anger, without desperation, as if the blow were simply another piece of data he had to process before continuing. The man who had hit him took this as an opportunity and lunged forward to finish the job. It was a mistake. Bruce Lee stepped aside just enough. There was a lightning-fast movement, almost impossible to follow with the naked eye, and the man lost his balance instantly. He crashed hard into the seats, left trying to figure out what had just happened. The silence inside the car deepened. One of the gang members stopped advancing. Another began to back away. The youngest of the group was no longer trying to participate. He stood by one of the doors, watching Bruce Lee with a mix of bewilderment and worry, because there was something none of them could comprehend. Bruce Lee did not look like he was fighting with rage. He didn't seem to enjoy the confrontation, nor did he seem to be trying to prove anything. He acted with the serenity of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The leader managed to push himself up again. The confidence he had shown at the beginning was completely gone. A cut above his eyebrow leaked a trickle of blood as he stared at Bruce Lee with an entirely different expression. He had boarded this train convinced he was in control. Now he was starting to wonder who the man in front of him actually was. Then, the train took a sharp turn, the lights flickered, and for a brief moment, the entire car was plunged into absolute darkness. The aftermath when the lights flickered back on, everything had changed. Bruce Lee stood directly in front of the leader. The man was pinned motionless against the seats, with Bruce Lee's forearm resting against his throat. There was no unnecessary force in the move, no rage, but everyone watching understood the same thing. If Bruce Lee had wanted to end it right there, he could have. No one moved, no one spoke. The leader breathed heavily as he looked into the face in front of him. For the first time since he had stepped onto the train, he was truly seeing him. And what he found was not hatred, nor pride, nor satisfaction. Only an absolute calm, a calm far more unsettling than any threat. Finally, the leader choked out. "Who the hell are you?" Bruce Lee held his gaze for a second longer, then withdrew his arm. Someone tired of watching cowards hurt people. The silence that followed was heavier than any blow struck that night. The train continued hurtling through the tunnels of Manhattan while the passengers tried to process what they had just witnessed. The fear that had dominated the car for the last few minutes was slowly evaporating. The gang members no longer looked the same either. Some slumped against the seats, while others avoided looking at Bruce Lee. The aggression they had brought onto the train had completely vanished. Bruce Lee took a few steps back and stood in the center of the aisle. His breathing was steady. His posture remained exactly as it always was, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The leader adjusted his jacket and looked down. For the first time, he looked like a man desperately searching for an exit. "Let's go." No one argued. The gang members began heading toward the doors in silence. One of them moved slower than the rest. It was the youngest of the group. Before leaving, he stopped, looked at the blind veteran, and bowed his head. "I'm sorry." The apology was barely a whisper. Bruce Lee watched him for a few seconds, then learned to follow better examples. The youngest nodded and kept walking. At that moment, the train began to decelerate. The platform lights appeared through the windows, and the doors slid open with a long, metallic hiss. The gang members stepped off without looking back. No one tried to stop them. No one said a word. Among the passengers was a transit officer who had watched everything from the very beginning. He had remained frozen as the conflict escalated, and he did not intervene when it ended. He simply stepped out of the car and vanished into the station crowd. Some passengers watched him leave. No one called out to him. No one asked him anything. Silence and rain inside the train. The veteran sat back down, resting his cane across his knees. He tried to regain his composure, but everything was different. Tonight, he hadn't just been on the verge of humiliation. He had also witnessed something he hadn't seen in a very long time. Someone willing to act when everyone else chose to look away. The veteran cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Is anyone still there?" The question hung in the air. For a few seconds, no one answered. He waited for a response that never came. At that moment, the station announcement chimed. The doors were about to close. Bruce Lee stood up from his seat and walked down the aisle. As he reached the veteran, he paused for a brief moment. The old man sensed his presence and turned his head slightly toward him. Neither of them said a word. It wasn't necessary. Some conversations are finished long before they are spoken. A second later, Bruce Lee kept walking and stepped off the train just as the doors began to slide shut. The veteran slowly reached a hand out toward the space where that presence had been moments before, but there was no one left outside. The rain kept falling on the streets of New York. The city kept moving with its usual indifference, entirely unaware of what had just unfolded beneath its streets. Somewhere between the lights, the traffic, and the night, Bruce Lee vanished into the crowd as if he had never been inside that subway car at all. The silence remained for several seconds. No one tried to explain what had happened. No one seemed to find the right words. With the passing of years, many of those passengers would forget the exact details of that night. They would forget who struck first, how long the fight lasted, or the precise order of events. But they would never forget a feeling. The feeling of the exact moment fear stopped controlling that subway car. The feeling of seeing one person stand up when everyone else stayed seated. A blind veteran reclaiming his dignity. 5 men discovering that violence does not always find a victim. And a stranger who appeared, did the right thing, and disappeared before anyone could even ask his name. Because some people don't change the world by making noise. They change it in silence, and then they keep walking.